I'm Councillor Tim Gibson, and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. The meeting will be recorded and proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the Council's constitution, including procedural rules which are available on the Council's website. Item 1 on the agenda is the emergency evacuation procedure. There is no planned evacuation drill this evening, and accordingly, if the alarm sounds, it is to be treated as a genuine need to evacuate. There are emergency exits over to my far right at the steps and over to my far left through that door, those doors there. The assembly point is out in the car park, and it's important you remain there and do not return to the building until I've announced that it is safe to do so. If anyone present needs assistance in evacuating and negotiating the stairs, could you please inform me now so that we can make necessary arrangements to assist you? Thank you. The meeting has a quasi-judicial role and determines the rights and obligations of the applicant. Members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning the application and make their decision based solely on their planning judgment of the information available to them. Following a decision by members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice, and planning permission is not granted or refused until the issue of that decision notice. Any member of the council who is not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak, having given prior notification. Such visiting members may of course include ward members, and whilst visiting members can speak on an application, they are not permitted to vote. Any member acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken appropriate training before doing so. Members must remain in the meeting for the whole time that each item is being debated and should not vote on that item unless they have done so. I'd now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you that you will have 3 minutes to speak, and an audible warning of time will be given when there are 30 seconds remaining. If the meeting is deferred to conduct a site meeting, you may speak both at this meeting and at the site meeting, but there will be no further opportunity to speak on a matter when it comes back to the planning committee. The meeting will follow the order set out in the agenda. However, I will amend the order if there's good reason for doing so. And in particular, I will take any items where a member of the public is registered to speak first, before moving on to the remainder of the agenda, and I will verbally reorder the agenda as appropriate. Now take item 2, which is the apology for absence and any substitutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies for absence for Councillor Jackson, who's substituted by Councillor Angela Harrison, and apologies for Councillor Valentine.
Thank you. Could I now invite members' declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests? And disclosable non-pecuniary interests under the Code of Conduct. Okay, thank you, members. We now move on to item 4, which is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of October 2022, minute numbers 388 to 394, as a correct record. Do you wish that I do so? Thank you. Item 5 is a planning working group, and it's to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of November 2022 as a correct record. Again, is it your wish? Thank you. The next part of item 5 is to consider application 22/502340 which is land adjacent to Westfield Cottages, Breach Lane, Lower Alstow. And I'll thank the officer for outlining the updates, please. Again.
Can I first refer members to the table of uploads? Members will know that the site last month. To see that on the screen. So members can see that the application site now consists of a rectangular parcel of land at the very top sides. Previously, the red line was drawn around the entire site, including the land that is now shown in blue. So the application site is now. Yes, so as you can see, if you can see where the arrow is, the red line. The red. Yeah, whereas previously the whole site including the area of blue. So the application is for a single self-built dwelling with a attached garage and carport. And the application is in all matters other than access reserved for consideration. There's an illustrative site plan which I'm just showing now, which shows how a dwelling could be accommodated site. And you'll note that there's a building just to the south of the site, which is an existing building on the site, which is now not the application itself. Back to the photographs. This is the site here, so the application site is now confined to the area of lands to the right-hand side of the building that members can see. Members can also see the.
Mr. Byrne, may I just interject for a second? People online can't actually hear. Would you be able to move a little closer for us?
Do you want me to come and sit down?
It'd be really helpful if you could. Thank you.
I need to, oh, it's lost. Sorry for those of you who just see my back. Good luck with starting.
Yeah, it may well be helpful. Yeah. It may be even still that you've still got them forward to speak anyway, Councillor Bonny. So. Yes, yeah. Don't get me wrong, please here for those that are a little bit nervous about sitting at the front. I don't have any problem with it, but clearly somebody has. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Byrne.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start again for the benefit of those people that have joined remotely. Firstly, refer members to the tabled update. There's been a change in the application site area. The application site is now confined to the area of land that's shown on the plan that members can see on the screen, which is outlined in red. And the rest of the site is outlined in blue, with the ownership of the applicant, but not part of the application site. The application is for a single self-built dwelling and detached garage carport. The application has been made in outline form with all matters reserved other than access. Site's located in the countryside beyond the village settlement of Lower Howstow and on the west side of Breach Lane, which is predominantly open and rural landscape. Show members some photographs here. The site is on the right-hand side of the photo to the right of the outbuilding that members can see. Likewise, another picture looking across the wider site. And the picture on the left shows the site looking back towards a row of cottages which are on the east side of Breach Lane. Again, pictures of those cottages from the site itself. This shows the access arrangements. The diagram on the right-hand side shows where access will be taken for the proposed dwelling, which is the same as the existing access to the site. This plan shows an illustrative site layout for the dwelling. Obviously, this is purely for illustrative purposes and would be subject to reserved matters. But this shows how a detached dwelling could be contained within the site. And again, an illustrative elevation with a two-storey dwelling. And this gives members a bit of an appreciation as to where the site is in relation to Lower Housedow itself. The site is located where I'm putting the arrow now. And members can see Lower Housedow is defined by the red settlement boundary. Although some elements of the site are previously developed land, the land is essentially open and undeveloped in character. And development will be contrary to the council's settlement strategy under policy SD3 of the local plan. The officer assessment concludes that the divorce location of the site from Lower Housedow and the urbanising impact of the development with resultant harm on the character and appearance of the countryside and landscape significantly outweighs the benefits of the development, notwithstanding the current lack of a 5-year housing supply and the fact that the proposal is for a self-build development. I'd also draw members' attention to the planning history for the site and the fact that an appeal for 10 dwellings was dismissed recently in 2020, which incorporated development on this site as well. And this appeal obviously carries strong weight. And the reasons for dismissing the scheme are essentially the same as recommended with this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So I move the officer recommendation for refusal. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Okay, members. Councillor Winkles.
You want me to stand?
Yes, please. Yeah, or at least come forward.
Okay, thank you. I did pay a visit to the site. I basically not totally convinced at the moment which way I'm going to go on this. Visiting the site, I understand it's been refused by inspectors before, but it's an absolute desolate site. There's no grass, there's no greenery there. I understand that there was a load of rubbish on. I feel that if we was to go with the officer's recommendations on this, we're leaving a blighted site in the so-called countryside. So I will listen to the rest of the debate, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Winkles. Members, anybody else? Councillor Hunt, please.
I'm actually going to go against the opposite. I think the balance of it is one dwelling. I understand the appeal from last time, and that being with 10 dwellings. Now we're seeing that the land has been reduced in size. Was concerned at the time that you could get more housing on that site, but with it being reduced down, it is one property. It is outside the boundary of the village. I do think we do need to be doing more for self-build. It's one dwelling that doesn't impact the landscape as much as the 10 would have done previously. And because of there being a building already on the site and partly previous land, the state of the site down there, I think the house isn't going to be completely out of keeping, especially with a single dwelling. It's the sort of house that you do get in countryside anyway. So something that would be. So I personally think on the balance of it, especially with the we have 5 years supply, only one house, but comes better than that. And it's especially if we did here on the site visit as well, it's not really a material consideration, but it is good if someone in the village is going to build their own house and also frees up another house. So I think on the balance of it, I would go should be free.
Thank you. Councillor Markington, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know the site well. I've spent a lot of time on teams around the area, but this particular proposal will only be one house. Notice that this design is in keeping with the older type of houses in there, And also note that the parish council has no objection to it, and I think the view that they know their own area better than us. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, anybody else? Okay, take this one to the vote then. Sorry, Mr. Byrne, yeah.
Yeah, if I can just make a couple of points for members to consider. Firstly, in terms of design, obviously design's not set. That's a matter for reserved matters. These are only illustrative plans. But the one thing I would say is that although the application site has been reduced in size, of course, there is nothing to stop potentially future applications to come forward on the land to the south. And members may want to consider to what degree this sets a precedent for us to then be in a weaker position to resist further development on that wider plot, and to what degree, if we allow this property at the northernmost end with another property then to the south of the site, to what degree it could then be argued that actually infilling this area is less harmful. So just something for members to consider. Although the application site has been reduced, it doesn't mean that, you know, that area of land to the south is then protected from development. Thank you.
I would just say, and I'm still trying to make my mind up on this one, but I would just say that if we accept a planning application because the land is tatty or damaged or whatever, it is an absolutely open door for future developers to allow land to be damaged or to damage it intentionally, and then say, well, I'll tidy it up if you let me build a house on it. I think that is a dangerous precedent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Marchington.
So I want to come back on that point, please. We're continually told in the planning here over many, many years now that we're not to look what the future might be and not to take into account whatsoever, and we should only look at the issue in front of us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, so just so that you're aware, we're voting on the officer's recommendation to refuse permission. Not grant, okay, so it's to refuse. So those in favour of the officer's recommendation to refuse permission? Those against the officer's recommendation? And any abstentions? So that motion is lost. There were 6 for the officer's recommendation, 9 against it, and 1 abstention. Yeah, Councillor Hunt.
We'll just say that I think it is a bit of a unique thing. I think I do understand the concern of other land coming forward. But I think the way the setting of this land boundary is with existing buildings on the site, it is a bit different. I think if anything does come up more to the south, then I would say that the landscape issues that do come up with. And that's something we will need to look at if it does come. But I propose that we approve this, subject to all the relevant conditions. If there's anything in there that we can make sure that it is self-build, then that will need to be put in. Because this is only the self-build me that does sort of help push that forward, that balance. There's any other additions we need to add in the general conditions.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Beard, thank you. Anybody wish to speak to it, Councillor?
Yeah, so I know previously looked at energy efficiency provisions, so those should definitely be included. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, if I can make a point, because this is an outline application and in line with how the inspector considered, if memory casts you back to Barton Hill Drive,
Yeah.
the inspector applies a relatively generic condition rather than setting a set figure, which we have essentially adopted with outline applications with the expectation that as reserved matters come in,
Yeah.
we will see further information on that. So we wouldn't normally expect to put a set figure down at this stage with an outline, but we would use a similar condition to the one that was applied at Barnet as
Yeah.
well.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, please.
I appreciate this is outlined. If it is to be approved, then either now or at the detailed stage, I think it is absolutely essential that there is a firm soft landscaping condition which includes as much landscaping as we can possibly achieve and as ever of a type that will improve ecology and biodiversity. Thank you.
So landscaping is one of the reserve matters. So it's inherent in a reserve matters application that
Yeah.
landscaping proposals are included as part
I
of
did
that.
say when it comes through as well.
Thank you. So members, you've heard the proposal on the floor. Those in favour? Those against? And any abstentions? So that is carried again by 9, 4, 6 against and 1 abstention. So permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice and suitable conditions appended. So right, we're going to now move on to item 2.2, please. And this one is number 10 Ferry Road, Iwade. And its reference is 22/503/684/4. The officer for any an outline, any updates, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. There is no update for this application. This is a largely retrospective application for conversion of an integral garage to habitable accommodation. The garage is currently subject to a planning condition that was imposed when permission was granted for the dwelling in 1999. And the garage access is to the rear of the site here, and access is via this route here, which takes you to the site. The front of the site has no vehicular access, and there is a stream that runs through the frontage, so it's not possible to get any form of access there. And obviously that was one of the reasons why the house was designed with a garage access from the rear. The main issue is the effect of allowing the conversion and its impact on parking provision within the property. The property is a 3-bed dwelling, and our standards would normally recommend 2 parking spaces are provided for the dwelling. And in this instance, the property currently has the garage and 1 parking space in front. However, the dimensions for the garage are well below the dimensions for a garage as specified in our car parking standards, SPV. And whilst this is a case of retrospectively applying those standards to an existing garage, we have had recent appeal decisions elsewhere in the borough where inspectors have discounted existing spaces, garage spaces and parking spaces as usable parking spaces because they fall well below, or when they fall well below, the SPD standards. So we feel that we need to take the same approach here, and on the basis that the garage does fall well below the standards within the SPD, the garage at the moment, just for reference, is 5.1 metres deep by 2.7 metres wide, and the car parking SPD requires for a garage to be counted as a space, for that to be, I think it's seven metres deep and 3.6 metres wide. So it's significantly below the car parking standards. And on the basis that inspectors have very recently said we shouldn't count substandard garages as spaces, we feel the same has to apply here, and that if we can't count this as an existing space, there's no harm if it's converted to habitable space. The applicant had originally proposed to incorporate a space within their rear garden. But because of the configuration of the property, their rear garden is only this very small area here. And to provide a space, they're essentially removed pretty much all of their private garden space. And we didn't feel as though, in the whole balance of things, that was the best way forwards, because the property would have been left with no usable private amenity space. So on this basis, our recommendation is that planning permission should be granted. Members will note that there has been some concern raised by a neighbour about the provision of or an existing window that's in the garage in the side elevation, which faces into their property, which again forms part of the rear garden to their property. Their garage is here. That window is currently clear glazed, but because it serves a garage, there's relatively limited overlooking, whereas if that garage is converted to a habitable space, there's more opportunity for overlooking then on a daily basis. The applicant is agreeable to a condition to obscure glaze that window and to fix it shut. The neighbour would like the window completely removed, but we feel that obscure glazing the window is an acceptable solution, and members will note condition 2 requires that work to take place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Sam Fuzzard, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, thank you.
Thank you very much. If you could put that onto page 2 with a photo of the rear of the property, that would be great. It'll just help me think, yeah. Thank you very much. Anyway, thank you for providing us the opportunity to share our concerns. Firstly, I would like to clarify our original concern shared on the 24th of August through the neighbour comments. There's an existing window facing our entire rear garden within the property. Up until recently, this had always been fully obscured internally with a wooden blockade. We assumed this was a permanent fitting. However, they have now removed this and now have the ability to open and view out this window. Within the latest document, it states proposing this window to be picked up is unreasonable as it already exists. However, this hasn't been used as a window throughout the entire time we've lived here, up until this transformation. And a new window has been installed in a more reasonable location, as you can see in this image. I believe this request to be more than reasonable and cannot stress enough of the privacy concerns, as this is a standard sized window and at eye level height to our entire rear garden, directly on our boundary wall. If privacy glass must be the answer, then privacy level 3 that the document suggests is not sufficient enough. We recommend privacy level 5 because this application suggests this is going to be a family room facing our entire rear garden. We would also like to understand exactly how this existing window will be fixed shut and be obscured in a way that cannot be easily reverted. In addition, there has been a recent amendment to the planning on the 28th of August, removing the proposed additional parking space, as you just said. According to the document uploaded the 2nd of November, reported to Planning Committee, the existing garage is undersized. Its loss would not result in a reduction of the number of spaces at the property. However, I must argue that extending the habitable space within this property and potentially increasing this to a 4-bedroom house, 1 parking space is simply not viable when on-road parking isn't available. There is frequently a car park directly in front of their space, blocking both the public footpath and access to our property. So requiring an additional space is evident. We have no objection to this planning application if it can be agreed that the existing window is on our, the existing window on our boundary line is bricked up and there is an additional parking space on the property to allow 2 vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor Chase. Members? Councillor Bonney?
Thank you. I have some sympathy for the neighbour. I've installed some glass and level 3 is not very obscure. So I think if the committee were minded to progress tonight, it should be a minimum of level 5. It should be total obscurity. I don't think it's fair that what becomes habitable room would be effectively overlook the neighbour's garden there. There's no fencing that, you know, that the applicant reasonably put up, because it looks like the property is on the boundary line. I am concerned about parking, because this is clearly thatched, isn't it? House here, where really reasonably got one place. You can see the car sticking out the end of the road there. But I understand that losing the garage, I can understand that that's not suitable. Most garages are full of junk anyway. Not saying the applicant is generally, but that's too small to reasonably use. But to have a detached house of this size without adequate parking is, I think, a concern for the committee and certainly with interest.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Yeah, I know these properties quite well, sort of walk past them every day. And the parking there, it is a problem, but there isn't much room on it. I can understand what officers are saying, that there is no difference, that you can't fit that car in the garage. So whether there's a garage there or not, and whether we're going to change it or not, parking hasn't made any difference. The applicant has tried to increase the parking, but the gardens are very small, and you will literally have no garden that are in there. That could also be done at any time if they wish. It's got the boundary there, you could take the fence out and they could put. I guess they really wanted to, depending on what conditions on the house are ready. But the actual garage itself, though, doesn't fit car, so I can't see the problem there with parking. I do agree that the privacy glass should be 5. We can take that in addition rather than 3. It does make sense. It would be good to brick it up, but I can see that we can't keep requesting that, unfortunately, because the window is already there. Someone could use the garage every single day, or another car or something, and looking at the garage and leave them open as it sits already. So I think the best thing to do is to get that obscured as much as we can.
Is that possible too?
Yeah, our standard approach to obscure glazing windows is to seek level 3, but I think that in this instance, members, I think, can legitimately say there is good reason, given that the window is hard on the boundary and immediately looks into the neighbouring property, that a higher level of obscure glazing is required in this instance.
Thank you. Councillor Beer, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. From my point of view, as on that subject, I can understand why bricking it up isn't the option they want, because you want natural light getting into the room. Some, even for obscure glass, you're going to get natural light.
Yeah.
If it is right on the boundary looking into the neighbour, it's not just obscure for the neighbour's benefit, but also for theirs. They're not going to want people in the neighbour's garden looking straight through their window into their family room. So I think if officers can secure that agreement with both sides, I think that sorts out everything, and I'm happy with this.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the question for the other side is that's a single side extension effectively, isn't it? There, where the garage is.
Yeah, it's part of the original house.
But so the void space in the roof, I mean, is there any reason why they couldn't have a roof light and remove that window as a position of this? because a roof light would, by definition, give an awful lot more light to that room. They could have a vaulted ceiling, which would give it internal, I'm an interior designer, but I would say that actually that would get around the issue of privacy glass, our window.
I think we're in the situation of, does what the applicant is proposing to do, does that remedy the issue? And yes, it does. I think it's fair to say that if they were expected to block up the window and put a roof light in, that would be more onerous. And there's no planning reason why obscure glazing that window doesn't achieve the privacy that's required between the two units. So I would suggest that whilst it might be seen as a preference to go for blocking up the window and putting a roof light in, that actually what is being proposed now to obscure glaze that window, particularly if it's going to be to level 5, does actually achieve the privacy that's required between the two units.
What I want to be clear though is that that's not openable. So is that locks are removed, or is it a whole new window with actual privacy glass rather than a film and glass that can be removed?
The condition simply states at the moment that it should be obscure glazed and fixed shades. If members consider it's appropriate, that could be amended to provide a scheme to the council as to how they're going to do that. So we can then make sure that that is what comes forwards is acceptable and not, like you say, just applying a film.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons, please.
Thank you, Chairman. On this question of the window, the last bullet point in 5.1 says that the window is not required for light as the garage door has been replaced with a window for this purpose. So what is the objection to breaking the window up? And just as a matter of pure curiosity, I wondered why HM Explosives Inspectorate is one of the constant chiefs.
I know the answer to that question, but I'll allow Mr. Byrne to tell you.
It's something that's done at validation stage before the application comes to the officers. There is an explosives facility in the area which has essentially a cordon drawn around it, and any development that takes place within that cordon, depending on what it is, could trigger a consultation to the Health and Safety Executive. In terms of the first point that you made and the reference to, was it paragraph 5.1?
Yes, 5.1, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I accept the fact that they are proposing a window which will provide light into the converted garage. The window on the side is already there, essentially. And again, we're back at the point of what needs to be done to mitigate any impact. And yes, the window could be removed, but it can also be obscure glazed and achieve the same outcome. So our view is that that is an acceptable form of mitigation.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, please.
Yeah, I have to say, I think we're making a real meal of this. If it's obscured glass to level 5, that really is jolly nearly completely opaque.
Yeah.
I have a couple of windows on the side of my house which are obscured at level 3 to protect me rather than my neighbour. But the very most you can see there is a shadow walking past the window. So level 5, I think, is quite acceptable. I do think the more important thing is that this demonstrates that we need to be a great deal more careful on future developments, not so much the garage size, which is now settled at a more reasonable size, but also allowing developments with tiny gardens, particularly in areas where parking is a problem. So
Thank you.
it's not relevant to this, but for the future, I think it's important.
Councillor Martin, please.
So the only thing I would venture to suggest on this is that another condition be applied to ensure that the garage, the former garage block is actually insulated to a suitable level so that the house can still a minimum energy efficiency standard in the sector. Last thing we want to do, we don't know if someone may purchase it, rent it out privately in the future. Let's make sure that we're building in proper standards now, not 5 years later.
Well, my understanding is that a conversion would be governed under building regulations anyway. We don't apply efficiency standards to extensions to properties, and if we start with this one, where I think this is covered reasonably under building regulations, and that's not something that we can reasonably require.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You say the garage size is 2.7 metres wide. I mean, can a car be fitted in that garage? What is it being used for that purpose?
Well, it's not now because this is retrospective, so it's already partially been converted. We have attempted to argue those appeal decisions that I referred to earlier, where inspectors have taken the view that garages that don't meet the parking standards don't count as spaces. We've attempted to argue that in those instances that if you can still reasonably fit a car inside a garage, then it's still usable. Inspectors didn't agree with us on that. They came to a different conclusion. No, they're not countable spaces. So in light of that, that's why we've taken this approach with this application and taken the view that if it's below the SPD standard, that we can't really count it as a usable space.
So it's converted into a habitable space.
Yeah.
Is this to increase the capacity of the occupants of that property?
Well, I mean, as with all kind of works to dwellings, you don't know for sure, and you can't control that to any particular degree. But it's shown on the plans, as you can see, as a family room.
And it could be converted to a bedroom. Hence,
Well, yeah, but you could argue that. You could argue that with any property, can't you? That a room could be converted to a bedroom.
Then you have to provide another parking space. It's not being used. It's not going to be increase the capacity of the occupants. Then if it was being used and it's going to be converted to a bedroom, hence you may have need for another car without bonds.
Thank you.
Last-
Quickly, Councillor Bonnie, yeah.
Yeah, so, I think what you know, this is obviously becoming a capital state. I think what I'm more concerned about is the interference with neighbours. Everyone likes a quiet space, but also the occupants of this building is about noise transference. So the window, glass window is there, that be fixed shut, that's fine. But if that's being used as a family in the bedroom, whatever, if someone's playing, if someone's in the garden next door, right next to it. I mean, there aren't very big gardens, there's nowhere else to go that far. So long as that is suitably sound insulated, because if it was a wall, and with my suggestion of having, you know, a roof light, then you've got, by definition, sound insulation, but glass is much thinner.
Councillor Pearce.
Going back to the previous comment, can we not condition that it doesn't become sleeping accommodation on the basis that 8.22, it clearly states that it's in flood zone 3, and the officer recommends it for approval because they have no concern because it's not going to be sleeping accommodation. But if we're saying, well, it could be done.
Well, the difficulty we have is that you know, you have to strike a balance between how people can reasonably use their properties. We don't have that element of control, I would suggest, in a situation like this. And also, from an enforcement perspective, it would be, you know, it's very difficult to be able to enforce against these, you know, anything like this, in terms of how we monitor it. I think if you get into that territory, it's not something that the planning system has the ability to control, I would say, at all. It would, you would then potentially, if you repeated this again and again and again in other instances, it would be very, very difficult to actually be able to monitor and enforce.
Thank you. Right, members, I see no one else indicating. Thankfully, someone say. We'll take this one to the vote. Those in favour of the officer recommendation?
Sorry,
Yes.
are we including in the vote, a move to level 5 car? Yes.
We are indeed, and I would say permission granted subject to the conditions as amended. Yeah. Okay, those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? That's 14 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. So permission is granted subject to the issue decision notice. Thank you very much. Members, I'm going to take the liberty now of moving on to item 2.4. If we have the speakers on this item. And this is Willow Trees, 111 High Street, Newington. And its reference is 20/505059/12. I thank our officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Thank you. Good evening. The application at Willow Trees is a full application for 10 dwellings, proposing 7 3-bedroom dwellings and 3 4-bedroom dwellings. As you can see on the screen, the site is the area outlined in red, and this includes an existing dwelling known as Willow Trees and land, including its garden and former orchard. The site is situated to the north side of the A2 in Newington, and close to existing residential dwellings either side, with the new Watling Place development in the north. This gives an aerial image of the site. You can see the cursor, the existing dwelling, which is a chalet bungalow here, and the land which forms part of its curtilage either side. Not sure what's happening with this. In terms of the access, this is proposed from the A2 for the proposed 10 new dwellings in the site. These photos just show the existing bungalow on the site and the land condition, which include former fruit trees and the existing access to the dwelling, which would remain the same for that dwelling. This is the northern site boundary, which includes a row of alder trees, which would be retained as part of the proposal. And the land to the north includes open space and the new modern development at Watling Place. Technology is not working today. Another photo just showing the northern boundaries on the left-hand side of the screen, with the new modern development Watling Place, and in the foreground is the open space which the proposed development would overlook. This is a view from the north of the site looking back onto the site. You'll see the alder trees which form the northern boundary of the site, and the Watling Place development to the right-hand side. This is elevation of the existing dwelling. Sorry, the PowerPoint is not playing ball today. The proposed scheme is for, as I said, for 10 dwellings This includes 2 detached dwellings in the southern part of the site, with a row of 2 terraces in the northern part of the site, which represents a lower density development in the south with a tighter grain in the north. Each 3-bed dwelling would have 2 parking spaces, with the 4-bed dwellings having 3 parking spaces each. There is an existing public right of way on the eastern part of the site, which is proposed to be provided pedestrian links to the scheme, which would also allow access of these residents to the existing open space in the north, and a contribution is sought for improvements to the surfacing of the public footpath. The image on the left shows a wider context of the site with the adjacent properties, and the proposed street scene is a view from the north, where you have the 2 rows of terraces, which are 3-storey dwellings. I've included a number of the proposed elevations. So plots 1 and 2 are 2-storey detached dwellings of traditional scale and bulk. And then the plots in the northern part of the site are 3 stories with gable roof forms. These are plots 3, 4, 5, and 6. These are plots 7, 8, and 9. And then just to the south of these terraces is another detached dwelling, which is 2.5 stories in form. In terms of sections that have been provided, given that the land is at a lower level than the high street, this is of the front elevation showing the existing dwelling, and plot number 1, which would be in the foreground closest to the high street. This is a section which shows on the left is the level of the high street. It's not that easy to read on this screen, unfortunately, but the outline of plot 1, the outline of the existing dwelling, and then at the northern end of the site is the 3-storey development. And then again, this is just another section which shows the high street at the front, plots 1 and 2 in the middle, and then the tighter grain development in the north. This is the proposed access site, which would be off the A2 and wrap round into the site. The application is recommended for approval. The council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. This application would represent a modest scheme for 10 dwellings and would be infill development. Is not considered to result in any material harm in terms of landscape, highways, or any other material considerations. As such, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Parish Councillor Stephen Harvey, please, to speak on this item? Yes, please. Yeah. Should just stand up for a second.
Thank you. What wasn't made clearer, this is outside the established built-up area of Newington. The design is urban, it's urban infill, a poor design, small gardens that plot 10 abuts the public footpath, which it intersects twice, which residents may not welcome. 3-storey dwellings on the development are incongruous in this situation, the A2 being defined by bungalows along that side. I don't believe it meets Swale Council's parking standards. 10 dwellings, 33 beds in total, 23 parking spaces, including tandem parking, with 3 visitor spaces which are bound to be used by residents. There would be no overspill parking possible on site, therefore it would mean people would park on the A2. I refer you to the comments from Kent Police for the land next to Newington School, which recommended that parking spaces should be visible from a main room of a house. Otherwise, people tend to park on front gardens to avoid their van or car being out of sight. The mitigation measures here, cycling, electric bicycles, it's very nice, but they're not safe. You wouldn't advise it on that stretch of the A2. The travel vouchers for 1 bus between Sittingbourne and Chatham only daytime, only weekdays and Saturdays. People, I don't believe, would walk to the station over 800 yards to a bus stop. Therefore, they'll drive, and that will increase the pollution in Newington air quality management area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Emma Hawkins, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening, members. During the processing of the application, we have engaged extensively and constructively with officers. In particular, advice has been sought from the case officer and the urban design officer regarding the scheme design, and there has been close liaison between the project team and environmental health officers regarding air quality mitigation measures. The proposal before members tonight is a culmination of the advice received, and it is supported by your officers. The scheme has changed significantly since application submission in 2020. The number of dwellings has been reduced considerably, with numbers decreasing from 20 to now 10 units, and with the retention of the existing chalet bungalow. The layout has also been altered significantly, with a substantial redesign of the middle section of the site. The move towards a scheme which is outward looking, with dwellings facing towards the northern and southern boundaries, i.e. onto the Sang and facing the High Street, has been led by officers and is key to the revised design approach. A more organic layout has been created with a curved access road and with dwellings set away from the boundaries. The retention of boundary screening, including category B trees, as well as the retention and enhancement of a significant area of orchard planting, are central elements of the scheme. The orchard area will be a spacious green corridor within the site, planted with orchard trees, including native fruit and nut tree planting. The trees will be of local provenance, including varieties of apple, pear, cherry and plum. With regards to air quality, the air quality mitigation statement has been reviewed and updated during the application process. The air quality consultant engaged with environmental health officers to agree the measures now being proposed. The mitigation measures include 6 months travel vouchers on public transport for all residents, which will help to encourage the use of public transport. In addition, a £500 voucher per household towards the purchase of an electric bike from Unrestricted Bikes, a local city-born business, will be provided. Other developer contributions will be towards primary and secondary education, a contribution towards Key Street highway improvements, provision of an all-weather circus to the adjacent public.
30 seconds remaining.
As well as contributions towards formal sport and open space. Given the council's lack of 5-year housing land supply and that the tilted balance is engaged, the proposal will provide additional housing in the borough. The site is in a sustainable location and close to shops and services, and includes a significant level of developer contributions. Therefore, we respectfully ask that members support the officer recommendation and grant approval for the scheme.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Councillor Alan Horton to speak on this item, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I called this application into committee about 3 weeks after it was first published on the portal in January 2020, because it was very clear there was a great deal of anger and concern in the community about the application and the implications for the village. I highlight the spalling character of the proposal, the entry onto the A2, and the historic difficulties with wastewater and sewage as good examples. However, since that initial application, the proposed scheme has shifted dramatically. Nonetheless, you have heard from the parish council that significant objections remain. If the committee is minded to approve this application, then I wish to invite the following considerations. I believe some of the concerns expressed can, in my view, be further mitigated by working with the developer. In particular, in the negotiation of Section 106, I respectfully ask that the committee consider that Newington Parish Council be allowed to contribute as was agreed by the previous head of plan. And furthermore, I'd like to see the developer required to work with the parish council as community representatives to refine the bus pass scheme within the cost envelope so that it works better for the community and occupiers of the new development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Councillor Richard Palmer as the other ward member, please?
Thank you, Chair. I fully concur with what the parish council had to say, and I do have serious concerns about the parking that will overspill onto the A2, where thousands of vehicles travel up and down, and it will lead to further congestion at points on the A2. I do accept what the developers said, that they have worked with officers, and I echo what Councillor Horton says. I think it could be a successful development had there been further and better engagement with the parish council. I think Councillor Henderson made a very excellent point earlier when he said about tiny gardens and parking, and this is the situation we have here. I also have a concern about the access from the public footpath, and I think as ward councillors, you all probably have experienced cases where there is easy access from public footpaths that leads to problems for you as ward councillors as the residents start to complain of people trespassing and throwing things and damaging their property. The idea of the electric bike is excellent. The footpath access isn't, because I'm sure them electric bikes without suitable storage will then disappear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move the recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. Members, Councillor Bonney.
Thank you. So what I'm concerned about is, I think the previous application is about parking and accessibility. Do you have an understanding of, do we expect refuse vehicles? Can they adequately go around service these? Just sort of point your cursor where the parking spaces are, because I'm always concerned about tandem spaces. They're a nightmare and they're not best practice. But what is absolutely crucial about this development is it's directly off the A2. We cannot afford for residents to be parking along the A2. We've got enough problems with the AQMA and congestion, especially with the junction 5 works that will be going on for the next few years. But even more traffic along the A2.
Yes. Just trying to open the plans for you.
Yeah.
I've got a
And
plan.
then where the visitor bays are, because clearly when you've got a grouping of houses, you're going to have frequent deliveries, pickups, drop-offs, etc.
Waiting. I try and show on the presentation, zoom in. Whilst the other plans load, yeah.
It's being mapped.
It's very slow. So as part of the application, KCC Highways have been involved, and they have reviewed the submitted swept path drawings for all vehicles and refuse vehicles. So this is the refuse vehicle drawing, which shows that the refuse vehicle can access the site and turn around in the site. So to enter and leave in a forward gear. I can zoom in if.
Yeah, if you could tell me in relation, so that's swept path analysis. So KCC have done this before. They do a swept path analysis, but they don't owe us an obligation because it's internal estate layout and it's Swell Borough Council's duty to get that right. They give that to us as informal advice. So what I've asked for previously, especially on something as crucial as this, where those visitor spaces are, so and where the car spaces are, because we can't have the vehicle refuse lorry in any way encroaching any of those spaces.
If I'll try and zoom in on this phone, which is a bit easier to read the parking spaces. So So the entrance to the site comes off the A2.
Yeah.
And then goes around the access road. So plots 1 and 2
Yeah.
have 3 parking spaces on the plot themselves. 2 are tandem places, and 1 is free parking space. And then there are 2 visitor spaces opposite plots 1 and 2 in parallel parking bays to the access road, which is a shared surface. And then whilst it loads again, but in the northern part of the site, there are 2 parking courts. So so 2 main parking courts. You've got this area, which is for plots 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then there's a section here for plot 7 and 8, and another parking area for plots 9 and 10. Plot 10 includes a parking space in a carport under the house, and then there's, you can see the turning head, which was shown on the other swept path drawings as well. So it wouldn't interfere with the visitor spaces. If I go back to that, you can.
And how many visitor spaces are there?
3 visitor spaces.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, please.
It's just a very brief point on this one. One of the mitigators of harm I would expect in any development, particularly one that's not in the local plan, would be for us to be meeting the local housing need. And that local housing need is best met through our affordable housing provision. We say that this is reduced from 20 dwellings to 10 application. That means that we've lost 8 affordable dwellings potentially there. Because we don't get affordable dwellings on the schemes less than 11, but we'd have got 40% if it was over 11. That's a harm to our local people, because realistically, a development of 10 houses isn't going to be bought by local people. It's not going to be rented by local people. It will be people coming into the area that purchase these properties. So it's not meeting the local housing need. We need to ensure that when we do have developments come through, that they are planned in a way that ensures that we maximise the amount of affordable housing that we get if we are going to do anything to tackle the needs of the people of this borough. This doesn't do it.
Councillor Henderson, please.
Yes, I'm very sympathetic to that point, but I was going to say, I think this is a manageable proposal. Certainly I'm not thrilled with losing affordable houses. It is remarkable how many developments come through for 10 houses rather than 11. Nevertheless, we can utilise the generous space allowance that 10 will take. And I think there are 2 particular problems. And I'd like to make a proposal that on the proposed acceptance of the scheme, we introduce 2 points. The first is 3 visitor parking spaces is nothing like enough. As Councillor Bonney said, I'm not too worried if the refuse lorries can get in and out, that's fine. But there'll be Tesco vans, Sainsbury's vans, Ocado vans, whatever. There'll be postal deliveries, there'll be Amazon deliveries, all kinds of that kind of visitor. There will also be visitors to the houses. So I believe you said there were 3 visitor spaces.
Yeah,
that's correct.
I'd like to propose that we insist that that is at least double to 6. And the other proposal I'd make is, I love the idea of helping with electric bikes. £500 to each house, I assume, rather than occupant. It's simply not enough. I bought an electric bike last year. for locally getting around, I don't come to Sittingbourne on it. That was £2,200. And that was the typical price. It wasn't that I was buying a particularly flash one. And I've no doubt it's gone up since 2021. So can I also propose that the electric bike funding is increased, probably not to 2,000, but certainly to £1,000 per household. We've got to look for good developments. And I think we're bound to take the developments, but we must ensure that they are excellent. And we heard on a previous item already that only a few years on from the development that came up after the site visit, we're criticising the development for not being good enough. All our new developments have to be good enough. And I suggest that those two proposed amendments would at the very least improve this development. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I just respond to those points, with regard to visitor parking, 3 spaces are proposed. The policy requirements will only require 2, given that it's only 10 dwellings and the requirement is 0.2 visitor spaces per dwelling. So at presently 3 visitor spaces would be more than the requirements. And then in terms of the mitigation, if I draw members' attention to 8.101, given that the scheme is only 10 dwellings, the damage cost mitigation is relatively low at £4,077, and the mitigation measures proposed would essentially double the cost of this. So if potentially, I'd obviously need to seek agreement from the applicant, but the measures proposed are quite high in comparison to the scheme and the damage costs identified. If the proposal to increase that bike voucher to £1,000 were.
Sorry, are you saying we can't do it or we shouldn't do it?
I'm just drawing members' attention to that the proposals are already above the damage cost mitigation, and those measures would need to be agreed if we were to pursue them with the applicants.
Well, forgive me, Mr. Chairman, but I'm sorry, that's not the point. The point which I was trying to make is that we must ensure good developments. And the agent brought this up, I didn't, that one of the things they're saying is great for the scheme is £500 for each house for an electric bike. That is patently inadequate. And that's why I'm suggesting an increase. As regards the visitor parking, there may be a minimum parking standard which says that for 10 houses, you only have to produce 2 spaces, so 3 is wonderful. Well, it's not. In that area, it's crucial. If somebody were living in my house, that 1 parking space per visitor would be fine, because there are 2 or 3 streets near me where parking is relatively simple, because I live on the outskirts of the town. But this is right next to the A2, and anybody who ever drives along the A2 knows what a pain that is. And we simply cannot afford for visitors to be forced to park on the A2. It would be insane.
Thank you.
So even though it's going beyond the minimum standard, our standard has to be good development. So may I leave my proposal in place?
So I'm just going to do a bit of a rain check with our legal officer at this stage, if I may.
I just wanted to add in respect of the air quality contribution, the damage cost cap contribution, which sits as set out in 8101 of the report at £4,077. That's based, if I'm correct, on a DEFRA calculation. So it's a national calculation that feeds in inputs about the development and pops out a figure at the end which says this is the damage cost calculation for that development in terms of air quality. The Section 106 agreement then can take that figure, because that is required to mitigate development. That is required. So we can put that into the Section 106 agreement and we can secure that. It's also possible to secure additional money through Section 106 agreements under other powers, 111 of the Local Government Act, I think it is. I can't remember all the different sections that we use. But that would be, if the applicant is agreeable, we cannot require anything above and beyond what is required to mitigate the impacts of the development. The developer at the moment is proposing mitigation, which is, as the officers pointed out, almost double the damage cost calculation. And they have suggested in their documentation that we could use that for welcome packs, travel vouchers for public transport, electric bike vouchers. So it's not set in stone that it will be all of those things. It's a combination of those things. And that's something that would then be negotiated through the Section 106 itself. So if members have a clear view that they would prefer electric bike vouchers, that's something that they can put forward and we can negotiate with the applicant. But yeah, what we can actually legally require is just the damage cost calculation. Anything above and beyond that is just something that if the applicant is willing to give us, we can accept and we can build into the agreement.
Which is what we've got in the report.
Yeah.
Effectively. I just want to bring it, we've got our head of planning as well. I just want to bring Flo in on this one, if I could, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worth reminding members that we can only determine what is before us for determination and not what we wish to see. So you are being asked to determine this application as it stands. And I completely agree with what our legal colleague has just said in terms of negotiating the Section 106. But what is before you for determination is the scheme that the officer has presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I do feel very strongly about this, and I come back to the point that we must ensure good development.
Yeah, with due respect, Councillor Henderson, you've made that point about 4 times, so that sits quite comfortably. If you've got anything else to add, please. Thank you.
The developer should also be looking for good development, and as it stands, I don't think it's good enough. So I would personally be happy to move it forward to say, if the developer does not agree to those improvements, then the application should be refused.
To second it or to speak, so I've got about 5 others to.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Right, so the proposal is, just so we get that clear.
The proposal is that we invite the applicant to provide £1,000 per electric bike and to provide 6 visitor parking spaces. And if that is agreed, we would accept the application, and if it is not agreed, we would reject the application.
The only answer to that would be a deferral, because we need to go back to the applicant first, to be fair to the applicant. So if anyone wishes to propose a deferral on that basis. Thank you, Councillor Bonney. Seconded by councillor Winkless. Yeah, okay, go ahead of planning, we're just wishing to come in.
It was just to reiterate once again that we can only determine what is before us for determination, and 6 parking spaces are not before us for determination. Chair is absolutely correct. The only way that we could change what is before you for determination is if we were to defer and negotiate with the applicant.
Thank you. So, yes, you can, yeah.
So for the record, for the officers that propose the deferral, is that as a member, I'm deeply unhappy with the parking provision that is there, particularly the visitor parking provision, because the A2 is extremely busy and congested. There can be absolutely no visitor parking on the A2. We want no leakage from this development. Issues around traffic congestion and safety. So it's to go away and negotiate that and bring it back to committee.
And what about the electrical?
Yeah, and to go away, discuss the provision of electric, because quite honestly, £500 buys you half an electric bike. So which half are you going to have, the battery or the bike? And I would like there to be a discussion in there about involving Newington Parish Council in the provisions of the section 106.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Actually, yeah, talking to that proposal, I don't think it's needed to do the bikes. We've already been told that it's there, that the damage calculation has been agreed. Goes to 106, and officers will already be negotiating what goes into it. If it's the wish of this committee that amount of bikes increase, then that's what the officer can negotiate with the officer to deal with that. I don't think there's any need to bring it back to a committee to talk about. With the parking, we not long ago adopted our own SPD standard. So to go back and ask the developer to put more spaces in than when they've already had more spaces there in our own SPD. As if I was going to answer around to them now, and then what you do, come back and review something that's already above what our standards are. I don't see any point in deferring to make a decision.
Thank you, councillor Beard.
No, Chairman, that was my point. We used to sit here and moan about the KCC parking standards, so we adopted our own. And we should now not be sitting here saying we don't like the standards that we adopted. I think we're being unreasonable.
Councillor Simmons.
Thank you. Excuse me, but I believe you've already got a proposal on the floor. Should we not be just voting on that before we vote on the deferral?
Yeah, procedure, you're correct. We should procedure, yes. Yeah.
Well, if it works better for our legal advisor, then I'll withdraw the first proposal and leave the second one on the table.
Councillor Beard.
That's not what Councillor Simmons was getting at. You moved the officer's recommendation. We need
Exactly,
to vote on
we
that.
must have on that first. Yeah. We're just checking that.
Apologies, committee, I've got a new constitution without my page markers in it, and I'm trying to find something procedural. So,
Okay, members, please.
so forgive me, according to Procedure Rule 3.1.38.25 in the Constitution, if during a debate on an item, a motion is moved to undertake a site visit or to defer the item to a future meeting, then a seconder for this motion will be sought. Any further debate will be to this new proposal rather than the substantive motion. The new motion will be voted upon following the debate. If this motion is defeated, a further vote will be taken on the substantive motion. So the deferral motion is now the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Right, so those in favour of the deferral? Those against? And abstentions? So that's 10 for, 3 against and 3 abstentions. So that motion is carried. The application is deferred. Yes, Councillor Henderson.
Are we clear on why we're deferring this, or do we need to?
Yes, yeah, we're absolutely clear. Right. Okay, members, thank you very much indeed. We're going to move now on to item 2.5, please. Yeah, I'm just going to do it. Well, 15 minutes. Try and make it a minute. Right, members, this one is item 21/505722 and it's 128 High Street, Newington. Members, before we consider this, you'll be aware that we had a very, very late update, Pastor, and I'm quite willing to give you 10 minutes up front to go through that. Agreed? Okay, so we'll adjourn for 10 minutes to allow you to go through those updates. Thank you. Only from Mr. King. I think this is very- Should we finish this out then?
That's the Henderson, yeah, that's the other one.
Okay, members, so as I said, this is item 21/505722 out, and it's, onto it High Street in Newington. I'll take also for an outline of the windows, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application is an outline planning application for the erection of 46 dwellings with all matter reserved except for access. The proposal would see the demolition of the existing dwelling at 128 High Street to allow the access to be formed, with development to the south of the existing 128 High Street. I'll refer members to the tabled update, which there's been time to allow to read. This includes KCC biodiversity comments, additional neighbour representations, and the council's approach to the lake KCC biodiversity comments we received. Officers have worked tirelessly today to agree an approach of series of conditions which would address KCC comments and ensure that any potential brick earth extraction wouldn't have any harmful impact upon material considerations such as ecology, archaeology, highways, land levels, or residential amenity. The updated conditions have been agreed with the consultees, and officers are of the opinion that any issues can be addressed via the ground condition and any pre-commencement conditions. In terms of the site is located to the south of the A2, as demonstrated on the red line site outline shown on the screen. To the north are existing dwellings on the High Street. To the west is existing dwellings on Callaway's Lane, and there are open fields to the south and the east. This just gives an aerial view. The site itself comprises the existing dwelling and its garden, with the remainder of the site being it was formerly paddocks and is now has a few derelict outbuildings, and the rest is extensive grass. In terms of the site photos, this shows photos of the existing dwelling on the site, on images on the left, and then the remaining 4 images are photos from the site itself, which show the condition of the site at present. It's not in any active use. This screen just shows further photos from the site itself and the existing derelict outbuildings which are on the site. These 2 images show the existing access at present, and this is where the proposed access would be for the 46 dwellings, with this dwelling here being demolished to provide the access to the site. These are some photos. This is taken from an existing public footpath, which is to the west of the site, looking north. Where the cursor is showing here is recent development at the Tracy's, and then along this part of the site is existing dwellings on the southern side of the High Street. This is just another view from the public footpath looking east across the site, which shows the condition of the site. This is the existing block plan. As you can see the cursor, this is where the existing dwelling is and where the proposed access would be. On the site is largely free from development except for a number of derelict outbuildings, and you can see the poor condition of these in the photo shown. This is the existing dwelling, which is to be demolished as part of the proposals. And then, as I mentioned, the application is an outline form, so the application has been supported by illustrative site layout. This will show the access coming from the A2 and then a perimeter block style development limited to the northern part of the site, with the southern part of the site being given to a community orchard and then landscape buffers along the western, southern and eastern boundaries. Scheme includes, the illustrative details include open space, SUDs, which would be integrated as part of proposals, and a pedestrian link to the existing public right of way, and then which would link to Newington to the west. The application has also been supported by a parameter plan, which just shows similarly what the illustrative layout demonstrated, which would limit development in the northern half with a loop internal access road to the north of the site, and development fronting out into the open space within the site and areas for the community orchard and landscape buffer. The site itself is partially in the assessment boundary and partially outside the assessment boundary. So where 128 High Street is and it's his garden, that's within the assessment boundary, with the remainder site outside of the assessment boundary. This is a plan of the proposed access. This is the only element where detailed consent is sought. I'm not sure why these aren't loading. And these plans show illustrative street elevations and typologies. The proposals will be two-storey form of a traditional scale and mass, with a mix of detached terraces and semi-detached dwellings. And the application has been supported by illustrative CGI views. There are two, and I'll just show these now. As members will be aware, the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. Therefore, the tilted balance is engaged. This scheme includes benefits in terms of provision of 18 affordable units, a biodiversity net gain, public right-of-way improvements, and it's not been demonstrated to be any material harm in terms of landscape, highways or heritage, and therefore the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Parish Councillor Stephen Harvey, please, to speak on this item? I'm going to chair this side, Stephen.
To be clear, this is demolishing a semi-detached house because it's the last house in the established built-up area of the village. That's because all previous planning applications to build outside the built-up area have been turned down by this committee, and in every case except one, the planning inspectorate has supported that refusal. The one exception is Eden Meadow, 200 yards further east. The developers made no secret of their ambition to join this up with Eden Meadow, where there was an extension planned, withdrawn this January, a week before planning committee. So this will be demolishing a semi-detached house, the last in the built-up area. The proposed housing would be outside the built-up area. The mitigation, again, is cynical. The same bus pass you can only use between Sittingbourne and Chatham, daytime, nothing at weekends, nothing in the evenings. Community orchard, no details of maintenance, not a facility needed in Newington in the centre of the North Kent fruit belt. The rural footpath would be transformed into pedestrian route to and from the new development. This would destroy our village as a village, a settlement on the Roman road, the narrowest point of the A2. Remember, it's now a 20-mile-an-hour zone because of the High Street Conservation Area and the Air Quality Management Area. Hence the reports we commissioned from the University of Kent, which you have, and Rayson Consulting on transport. This is opposed to policy ST3, which set Newington's growth at 1.3%. It's now over 200%. Full council last January agreed that there should be no growth in Newington on officer recommendations. Remember that all but one planning inspectorate decisions have been to refuse housing outside the built-up area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Paul Henry, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening, members. I am Paul Henry, owner and managing director of Esquire Developments, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me this evening. As Esquire Developments, we're a multi-award winning SME developer based in Longfield in Kent. We build around 100 homes a year. We have a local supply chain of subcontractors. We're currently building a scheme in Bobbing at the moment, which is delivering 30 homes plus the Demelza facility for the nurses accommodation there. We are also the applicant and the developer that was mentioned previously in relation to the Eden Meadows scheme that was successfully built in Newington a few years back. Our ethos is all about design and quality. We pride ourselves on the quality of our developments. We focus on climate change. We are concentrating our efforts on reducing our carbon emissions, and that's something that's at the heart of our schemes. This scheme is up to 46 dwellings in outline. It does provide 40% affordable homes, 18 on site. It is well designed with character of Newington taken into reference. As you saw from the plans, we've got a scheme here that's heavily landscaped with 100 metres worth of landscaping to the southern side. The site access has been well and detailed designed, lots of consultation with KCC, and that's deemed acceptable and approved. No objections on highways grounds. As we mentioned, half the site is provided for open space. There's a net biodiversity gain in excess of 37%. And I say that harks back to our principal ethos at Esquire of delivering excellent schemes. We're a fully electric developer. We don't have any gas coming into our developments anymore. We exceed 50% in all carbon emissions. And that's something that we strive to do prior to any building regulations coming into force. So we're not constraining ourselves by building regulations. And that can be seen at our development in Bobbing, as I mentioned earlier. We do encourage alternative use to private vehicles, and we have offered extensive mitigation measures in relation to air quality. Our team have been working with the environmental health officers at SWAL to come forward with a scheme that doesn't meet the minimum, but it far surpasses the minimum in terms of the offer, in terms of the cost calculator. We fully understand that development is an emotive topic. We absolutely understand that Newington is in an AQMA and that design quality is at the top of the agenda. That's why we come forward with an excellent scheme. We've intentionally left it in outlined form so that we can work with officers and the parish council to detail that scheme further and make sure that it's a scheme put forward that is acceptable for the local people. It is providing affordable housing on site and meeting a local housing need. As I mentioned, the whole scheme will be of high quality, substantially exceed open space provisions, except a 50%.
30 seconds remaining.
Except a 50% reduction and greater in most instances of our properties for carbon emissions. And as I mentioned earlier, 37% in biodiversity net gain. Thank you for your time, and I would appreciate your support of the officer recommendation.
Thank you very much. Can I invite Councillor Richard Palmer, who's one of the ward members, to speak, please?
The proposed development does not meet the requirements in the NPPF in relation to air quality mitigation. This application fails to achieve or offer any suitable mitigation to improve air quality. The air quality mitigation by THA for the developer dated July 2022, a bus pass, services between City Hall and Chatham via Newington. Mitigation is only for 1 year. The effects of poor air quality and particulates are a lifetime. Buses are only daytime Monday to Saturday, none on Sundays. The bus pass only for travel along the A2 doesn't help with travel north or south. Bus pass stops at Raynham. There is a surcharge to travel on to Gillingham or Chatham. To access other providers towards Maidstone or Gravesend, you'd still have to pay an excess charge. Psycho-Hire scheme only for 2 years, not really mitigating the problem of air quality, but kicking the can down the road.
The train scheme is lacking in detail. Can it be used during peak time? No. What are the other restrictions? It hasn't been shown how this mitigation measure would improve air quality within Newington AQMA. Peak train services are being reduced in Newington from January 2023. The Pond Farm application and subsequent appeals demonstrated the absolute need to have effective air quality mitigation measures. This application has not demonstrated how mitigation measures will be effective. The officer's report at 6.57 states the environmental planning team have had meetings with Medway Council in relation to the trans-boundary air quality issues and the cumulative impacts between Newington and Rainham air quality areas. They have not come up with any suitable mitigation measures to fix the problem of the air quality matters in Newington or Rainham. And at paragraph 6.58, in the short term, the council does not have any specific measures or mechanisms in place to reduce air quality, to improve it. There is no mitigation that will work in Newington. Look, as I do, I cannot see anywhere in our council's policies, the NPPF or case law that says paying a high bung is an acceptable price to pay for damaging people's health. The damage to health and the long-term financial burden to the NHS would far outweigh any financial mitigation monies paid. In meetings with officers in the summer of 2019, and again at a well-attended public meeting in Newington, the
30 seconds remaining.
They would develop the area between the Traces and Eden Meadow, some 280 plus houses. This isn't speculation, as highlighted by Councillor Marchington earlier, but it was made a firm commitment at a public meeting and with officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. I wasn't aware you did register to speak, Councillor Horton. Apologies. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, okay, yes, that's fine, yeah. That's okay, yeah, I've just been informed, yeah. Thank you.
Members of the committee, I wish to share with you the concerns expressed to me regarding the application and the implications for the community from the residents in Newington. I will deal with those that are directly related to this application, namely the access. I appreciate the KCC have made no objection to the proposed access and have asked for a Section 106 contribution and a Grampian condition to restrict occupation until the Key Street Highway improvement contract has been awarded. Parish Council commissioned Railton to look at the proposals for the access, and they concluded, after conducting a detailed, methodical and evidenced assessment, which was submitted and is in the pack on the 30th of August, that there were serious flaws in the access proposal regarding the visibility display and the pedestrian access and egress to the development site. The report author, Mr. Bruce Bamber, BSc, MA, MSc, MCIHT, is known to Swale Borough Council and has done work for them in the past. He highlights that the visibility spray to the east is at best 39 metres and notes that to achieve that even requires line of sight across the third-party property at number 132 High Street. That is far from ideal. Importantly, the practical splay at 39 metres is less than the recommended 43 metre splay for the site. It appears to me, when I read the papers, that the rationale for accepting a lesser distance is the 20-mile-an-hour zone recently installed further up the road. My concern is this isn't just any road. This is onto the A2, the primary diversion route for traffic from the M2. Whilst a few metres here or there on a visibility display doesn't sound very much, it's about the length of a car. That is a car that isn't seen when it should have been. I agree that the 20-mile-an-hour zone to the west has an impact on traffic speed on this section of the A2, but not in the way KCC have. I observe vehicles going towards Rainham, regularly picking up speed between the speed camera and the start of the 20-mile-an-hour scheme, and vehicles travelling towards Sittingbourne accelerate out of the 20-mile-an-hour speed scheme before braking for the speed camera.
and then
30
accelerate
seconds remaining.
to attack Voices Hill. Those are not behaviours that leave me content with a worse visibility than recommended. I ask you to consider very carefully the details around the proposed junction. You may be confident you know this stretch of road, probably drive it quite often, but when did you last try to cross the road at this point or come out of a driveway? I recommend that the planning committee conduct a site visit to observe the driver behaviour and the difficulties of crossing at this point up close. You will either be reassured and can
That's
progress.
3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hall. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Winkler.
I would agree with the.
Sorry, could you just
Sorry,
step on the chance,
sorry.
Councillor Winkler?
I do agree with the last walk out of Council Horton. I do use the A2 quite frequently. It's a very busy road. I know the house, passing it thousands of times over the 20 years I've lived in the area. I do think this is worthy of a site meeting to have a look at it because the visibility on that bit of road is pretty dangerous. So I propose a site meeting. I've got a seconder. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Bonney. Those in favour, well, do you want to speak to this?
I think to the site meeting.
Thank you, yes.
If we are looking at doing a site visit here so we can go and see what the traffic's like, are we suddenly can become experts and come up with some sort of information that KCC haven't as the hardline control thing? We're going to suddenly be able to say, oh yeah, actually, KCC are completely wrong and we've just suddenly got evidence for it because we're standing there looking. I don't think so. I don't think there's any point in a site visit and I will.
Thank you. Councillor Howson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It has concerned me over many years on the planning committee that KCC, whose word is final, quite often totally different to the views of local residents. Many times we've had this where local residents are saying that it would cause this problem and that problem and the other problem. And the bottom line is, if it goes to appeal, it's the highway authority's view that's taken into account and not the view of the local residents who might have lived there for 100 years, neither here nor there. So I have a lot of sympathy on this because, say, I've sat on many areas and gone to site meetings and said, but how can they possibly not see that there's a problem? Short of marching the highways people down to a site meeting to say, yeah, look at this. I don't actually think it will achieve an awful lot. But I do think that it might be worth going back to KCC and saying, look, there are concerns. This is a dangerous road. There are concerns. You know, could you revisit it? Which would mean a deferral and not a site visit. I travel along there, and I took the view. I'm the only one that on that 20, and then I very gently come out of it, and that's almost trying to get in the back seat, trying to push me along. Well, I go even slower. But
No,
yeah.
you're the one.
The cameras along there, I think. Fine. So, yeah, I don't think a site meeting would actually achieve anything. But I do think that there is something that's we could look at in discussion with the highway authority.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, please.
Only to say, I sympathise with Councillor Harrison because I've crossed swords on a fair number of occasions with the KCC, sometimes giving absolutely ludicrous advice. But we have to do what we can, and I would suggest that I will support a site meeting because I think if we have a site meeting, the parish council will no doubt be present together with local residents. We will get residents' views, we will get our own views, we'll get our officers' views. And if we put all of those to KCC, maybe at least they may decide to look at it more carefully.
Thank you, councillor Bonny.
Thank you. I seconded the proposal for a site visit. That reason is well, big site. But I wanted to ask is whether we've had any independent, not least because obviously we've got to determine the site layout, got future point, etc. This is outlined with access only. And so it's really important we understand the issues around access and we have the advice because they may be okay with the highway section, but we've got to connect to it. And I suggest that we are robust in our approach, that if we think there is a weakness, advice that we've been given, that we
If I could respond, KCC Highways have been consulted a number of times as part of the application, specifically regarding the access to ensure that the visibility displays, pedestrian connection points, and the way the access is proposed meets the required standards. So the routing comments which were submitted by Newington Parish Council, they consider the access drawing Rev P3, but they don't appear to consider a later transport and technical note, which includes this amended access for us. And with regard to visibility displays, it shows 42.5 visibility display to the west and to the east. At the carriageway it is 38.4, but at a 0.29 metre offset of the channel line, it's 43 metres. And in their comments, KCC are satisfied that that would be acceptable, this location. So KCC are satisfied that the access is sufficient and meets the required standards. We haven't sought independent highways advice, given the comments of KCC, and that they are satisfied with the access.
Councillor Winters.
Second one. What's put this to the vote in a minute?
Sorry?
Like to be putting this to the vote for a site meeting.
Yeah, we're still speaking to it in a minute.
Okay.
Or we were. Councillor Hunt.
So it's that clarification there, just to what you said, so Broughton, the looked a bit, but they were looking at the wrong plans.
So they're,
And they was, some plans resubmitted and made changes, and do they now then fall into what was this, what's that report from Broughton said? And also, sorry, if we did have our own highway consultant, that consultant, we don't do anything.
Yes.
So the routing review considers an access drawing, which is a Rev P3. There's a later drawing, which picks up on a number of the routing comments and also the KCC Highways comments. So from the view of myself and the highways officer, that those points have been addressed. And that's where we've got to now, that the view from KCC Highways is that the access is sufficient. For external advice, we have been using Project Centre, so there wouldn't be a conflict of interest if members chose to go down that route.
So sorry to come back. I think we were asked, there was some late stuff here. We've been asked to read some late stuff. That's only just come out. I think we as members need to fully understand here. We're reading stuff on the night. We've just got an update to say that actually that's now been superseded, etc. So it's time to fully digest that.
The parish council asked that their comments be appended to the report, which were done, and then so they had some work undertaken by Railton for highways and University of Kent for air quality. So those are on the portal, and they were the parish council asked for them to be circulated to members, which was done earlier this week.
Yeah.
Just the late information today was on a different, so it wasn't on the highways, it was on the Grampian Commission. So yeah, that's something separate.
Okay, right, so we'll take the statement. Sorry, councillor Hollis, yeah?
Yes, please, Chair. I thought this would be a case of assumption of the next. Yeah, we go on here. The traffic, just versus distance.
Well, yeah, usually, they normally use the modelling system. That's what I'm aware of, Karina.
I can't speak for KC Highways not here, but they would have had sight.
They use things like tricks for the data and all that kind of stuff, don't they?
They would have had sight of the modelling. They've probably undertaken a site visit, but I can't guarantee that.
Indeed. Councillor Martington.
Sorry, I'm deeply concerned with the lack of displays, just lighting the situation. And that's one of the reasons why I think we should look at it. You're still leaving the house which will block everything. I'm afraid I'm a little bit biased on this one because it's an A2 road, it's a main A2 road. But that's 40 years ago. I lost 3 friends who were putting that junction there. 3 died because they couldn't get across the road before the speeding car in the back. That's on the slightly biased in opinion. But you do need to be able to see more than just trying to come out 90 degrees. It's leading to 90 degrees.
Sorry, Jen, just on the point about the site visit being to assess the state of the access, I was just going to suggest, I mean, if members aren't accepting the KCC Highways advice, and it looks like they've looked at this on multiple occasions, as Corinna said, focused on the access. If members really aren't accepting that, and I think at least one of the members alluded to this, rather than go out on site and look at it yourselves, would it not be better to get our own consultants to do that exercise? The project centre, that is, because then that's an independent challenge to KCC.
Yeah.
Okay, but we've still got that proposal on the floor, so we've got to discharge that one way or the other anyway.
Sorry,
Okay, the second?
I'll withdraw as well.
Okay.
Can I propose that we defer it for a
Independent highways assessment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll
Okay.
second that.
So Councillor Harrison, thank you, and Councillor Bonnie seconded. Those in favour of that? Those against? And abstentions, please. That's carried, that's 12 for and 3 against. Oh, 4, was it? 4 against, sorry, 4 against. So that item is deferred for a future meeting. We now move on to item 3.1, please. Yes, mate, yes. That's the last one with any speed, isn't it? British apply. Right, so this is item 20/505046 full, and it's High Hopes, Poot Lane, Upchurch. Thank our support. And outline any updates.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, if I could refer members to the tabled update, which hopefully is self-explanatory. The site itself, it's a rectangular shaped plot of land located to the north of the dwelling known as High Hopes, which is owned by the applicant. The site's located approximately 0.6 kilometres to the north of Upchurch, within the open countryside and adjacent to an area of high landscape value. And Poop Lane is also a designated rural lane. The site also lies to the south of a scheduled monument, which you can see here, which relates to or forms the remains of an anti-aircraft World War II gun site. The application seeks planning permission for the erection of 2 detached buildings to be used as holiday accommodation. Each will provide ground floor living accommodation and a first floor bedroom. Let's go through the photographs for the site. This is the site from Poop Lane. Just see the application, the dwelling that's owned by the applicant here. Again, picture from Poop Lane and one picture showing the site internally. Other picture of the site there on the left-hand side. The picture on the right is the access road that takes you into the area where the anti-aircraft, that's what I'm looking for, anti-aircraft gun site is. This is site plan of the proposal, so you can see the 2 units proposed there. And these are floor plans and elevations of the units. They contain ground floor living accommodation and 1 first floor bedroom. National and local planning policy does offer support for sustainable rural tourism developments, and our main policy is BM3 of the local plan. The main theme of the policy is that such developments are firstly directed towards reuse of existing buildings or reuse of previously developed land. That tourist facilities are directed to locations where identified needs are not being met and where proposals are sympathetic to their location and result in no harm to rural or local landscape character. And in this instance, officers don't consider that the policy test is met. The site is essentially undeveloped land, and although the site is located next to a small cluster of built form, which you can see here, the prevailing character of the area is very much rural. No business plan has been submitted to identify a need for the accommodation proposed in this location, or what other more preferable sites have been considered, and the development would erode this rural character and is considered to be harmful. Officers are also concerned that the units would contain all facilities necessary for day-to-day living, and in the absence of a case for need and appropriate details to demonstrate that this can be a viable business, there is concern that there would be a risk that the holiday market does not materialise and pressure to remove occupancy conditions to allow permanent residential use. On this basis, the officer recommendation is for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite Parish Councillor Gary Rosewell, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening. I'm here to represent Upchurch Parish Council and support this application. This application has been on the planning portal for over 2 years, and in this time there has been no objection against it from anyone in the village. Upchurch Parish Council supports this application because its design is acceptable to the village and it's not overbearing. It does not impinge on any neighbours and will bring revenue to local businesses, the pub, the fish and chip shop, the co-op and the post office, without making a big impact on the traffic within the village. Over the 2 years, this applicant has met all requests to amend, change and answer any recommendations from the planners. I'm just a layperson, but in my training on planning, I've been told you must not judge on you must only judge on what's in front of you and not what you think is about to be dealt with, and the summary of reasons for recommendations for refusal, it mentions that although proposed for holiday accommodation, the design and layout of the units would appear as it's capable of occupation as dwellings. Now, if they want to change them to dwellings, they would have to submit a plan, which I'm assuming you would all refuse. Upchurch Parish Council fully supports this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I invite Mr. Curtis, please, to speak on this application?
The location is ideally suited for a holiday adjacent to the river, the Medway Estuary, for bird watchers and tourism in general, with Horsham Fishing Lake and Tanya's Riding School within 5 minutes walk. The application was first registered in November 2020, 2 years ago. The application was taken to a case meeting by the planning officer in December 2020, where the feedback from the design needs to be more sympathetic to the rural location. We changed the design to the liking to the case officer and the conservation area officer at the time. Throughout the period, we dealt with every consultation respond and drip fed with a long period of time. The last being the National England, who took 18 months to respond. All of these items required various reports and cost me in excess of £6,000, which I would not have committed to if the council were going to be against it in the first place. However, we now have approval from all committees. At no time we were advised that permission would not be granted. In May 2021, we were informed the application was working favourable, and more recently the officer replied to my agent regarding pre-commencement conditions being discussed. With that response, the consultation was agreed. It was only recently that the area planning officer said no holiday lets will be allowed in the countryside. We subsequently found a case at Willow Farm, Offspring, where 4 new holiday homes were approved and built in the farm in a rural location. The council argument is that never been submitted a business plan, which is the only difference between the 2 applications, and some front tree screening which we have added. Whilst this is something I have always ensured would work financially, a business plan has never been requested at this time, and this has now been the reason for refusal, with only because of apparent to me sight of the committee report. If this has been brought up from the start, I would have given my reason for the holiday let and my business plan. I belong to a scuba diving club and I'm a qualified diver for 35 years. And for that reason, 5 years ago, I built a swimming pool in the property. One of the business plan was to attract visitors for me to teach scuba diving. This would bring in funds, but predominantly the revenue would come from the 2 holiday properties.
30 seconds remaining.
If permission is granted today, my principal, I can forward a comprehensive business plan. I have previously agreed from the Sims bird payment will be made if the application is approved. We have parish and ward council support and they will speak for me. Thank you. Thank you very much. Could I invite Councillor Alan Horton to speak on this item, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Members, I know this application site well, and it seems counterintuitive to me to describe the site as best and most versatile agricultural land. And I've been unable to find evidence of a post-1988 ALC survey of the land being conducted to verify that that is its status. If it has been assessed that way, I accept it, but reiterate my point. This plot is not what a layperson would think or ever consider to be good quality agricultural land, nor is it attractive countryside. My first recollection is as an untidy, grubbed out plot which the previous occupant used to store unwanted items long term. The area was not properly fenced and became a site for fly tipping. The site has been cleared by the current owner and properly fenced to deter the dumping, and since then has been kept under control. In 2 years, no one has made any adverse comment on the planning portal about this site being used for holiday lets. the obvious conclusion is that the community feel the proposal is acceptable. The statutory consultees have all responded and have no concern, and the applicant has agreed to pay the appropriate compensation for the impact on the sensitive nature of the land. I conclude, therefore, the impact of this development on the countryside is low and has been properly mitigated. On the other hand, this is an opportunity for rural development that is consistent with sections 84 and 85 of the NPPF and will bring financial benefit to the local community, including a number of small retailers, local pubs, restaurants and so on. I'll remind members, if I may, that section 84 of the NPPF supports a prosperous rural economy, stating that planning policies and decisions should enable, and I'll cut this short, all types of business in the rural area, both through conversion of existing buildings and well-designed new buildings. Sustainable rural tourism and leisure developments which respect the character of the countryside. And section 85 says planning policies and decisions should recognise that sites to meet local business and community needs in rural areas may have to be found adjacent to or beyond existing settlements and in locations that are not well served by public transport. On balance, I believe the low impact of this development is significantly outweighed by the benefit to the local community and respectfully suggest
30 seconds remaining.
Is to grant this application. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. Could I invite Councillor Richard Palmer, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you. Isn't it interesting? We have full parish council support. They have both ward councillors. They have had no local objections to this. And in the report summary, the officer relies on the possible future use. How many times have we sat in committee hearing that decision should be based on what the application is and not what may happen in the future? Any change would need to be decided by this planning committee. You should take this under copyright, Councillor Martington. At 4.1 of the report, it states isolated homes. These properties aren't isolated. In fact, they are surrounded by dwellings in a small settlement near a former gun emplacement. At 4.2 of the report, this is a sustainable holiday location. Already in the lake, there are holiday homes that are frequently used by ramblers who enjoy walking and cycling. I think this council is seeking to encourage, improve and enhance. Visitors will support the local economy in Upchurch by using the local shops, the local pub, the fish and chips. This is made clear in the comments by Upchurch Parish Council you've just heard. It will also support other villages such as Lyre Household, our village for such things as the pub, the Three Tons and the Rose and Crown in Hartley and other such places along the routes. This contribution to the local economy would be most welcomed by local businesses in these current economic times. I cannot understand why this application has taken so long. The applicant has taken on board comments and adjusted the application. I hope this committee tonight will approve this application without further delay so the applicant can start his holiday letting business, particularly as staycations are becoming more popular and the council's walking and cycling routes are being mapped, produced and published for visitors. It would be shameful if this committee failed to support this application. I can't understand why at the 11th hour they're asking for a business plan. That is something that should have been asked for straight up, but I think there's a clear case, a clear business case in this area for holiday let accommodation. There's already existing, well used, and these will be well used and a profitable business I'm sure will materialise, supporting the local economy. Thank you.
Thank you. I now move the officer recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Joyce. I've got Councillor Hunt, then Councillor Harrison and Councillor Beard.
Thanks, Chair. When I read this, I mean, it's quite straightforward, and I do still think the officers have made the right decision from what we have heard. It is right that we have got policy DM3. There isn't the details that have been given to prove that the business will be viable. And it's not, if something else could happen, we do have to make sure that these are on the lets and there is evidence there that it's going to make sure that that can happen as best as they can. So I think the officers have got it right. But on hearing that the business plan hasn't been asked for, and that, I think that is completely wrong. We have had it for 2 years. It's not the first case I'm hearing that something's been sitting there bubbling along for whatever reason, whether it's that applicant or ourselves, the council, that have delayed things. It's madness that these things go on for so. I think we need, if that the applicant, as the speaker said that he has got the details, he's quite happy to provide that. I will ask for a deferral, that information can be given, and it come back to us. If the officer is still recommending refusal, if the officer is saying that they can prove it because of that information, then I think the officer should just approve it there and not waste time and bring.
Thank you. Councillor Beard.
I'm back in a second.
So, members, you've heard the proposal before, duly seconded. Those in favour? Should have asked if anybody wants to speak to it first, actually. Is there anybody who wants to speak to it? Councillor Howison?
Yes, thank you, councillor Hunt. Based on the information which the officer has, he has come to a recommendation for it. I haven't seen the business case, councillor Palmer, so I can't say, well, based on the business case, it's a no-brainer. And clearly the officers haven't either. So based on the information provided, we have got a recommendation before. If there is other information, I'm quite happy to support deferment. What I did find interesting was 18 months to get a response from Natural England. If that was Swellborough Council, we'd be on the front pages of every paper, every local paper, every day, and on all this social media malarkey. Then what the hell are you doing? 18 months. Falling.
I'm quite surprised at this business plan query. It does seem distinctly odd if the applicant assures us that he's not been asked for one, and then there is an implication, at least, that it's been turned down because there isn't one. So I'm happy to agree with the deferral, but I would warn people, it's not actually going to tell us much, because the applicant is starting from scratch, and who's to say whether a business plan is accurate or not? If I were doing it, I'd say, okay, the figures don't matter, but let's say 100,000 per house, and we can rent it for £300 a week, and I think I'm going to get 12 weeks on average from each house, so that's 3,600 from each, that's 7,200, and I need to allow this for maintenance, and
I think
so that makes it worth doing. He won't know whether it's right, and we won't know whether it's right.
Yeah.
But I think if that's the kind of business plan that's needed, let's ask for one, and
I think also,
I'm sure he can produce it by next week.
yeah, whilst I hear what you're saying, it also needs to be about demand and that kind of thing, about demand. So not just pure, figures in figure terms, it's £100,000 house and we need, so that business plan obviously needs to come forward. So, yeah, Councillor Hunt.
Just to clarify as well, with policy DM3, it's the identified need. I think that is
Yes.
what the wording is we're looking at. We need that identified need and the business plan to show that if we want to plans, there is a need for.
Yeah, and Councillor Beard, sorry.
Yeah, can I just add as well that, applying policy DM3, there's also a hierarchy in how you look at appropriate sites in rural locations. So the focus should be on reusing buildings, reuse of previously developed land before you get to greenfield sites. So there's a number of considerations under that policy that would need to be demonstrated.
Thank you. Councillor Clear.
I was just going to ask, we've heard a lot about this, was a business plan asked for or not? Surely the officers can advise us now if they are aware of one, because it's a bit like when we refuse something because the SAMS payment hasn't been provided,
Yeah.
but we've never actually asked for it.
That's, yeah.
So I'm just wondering, before we go for it further, was one asked for? I think that would be the first question.
Well, I asked that very question to the case officer, and I was advised that the case officer had a telephone conversation with the agent and said, have you got any further supporting information you can provide for the business? And the response was that they hadn't got anything to provide.
It doesn't ask them outright, have you got a business plan, or have you asking, have you?
Okay, I'm going to go to the vote now. Yeah, I'm going to go to the vote now on that. So those in favour of deferral? Those against? Thank you. So it's 14 for and 2 against. So again, that one is deferred to give an opportunity for business case to be.
Can we be clear, Chairman, before that, there was now a business plan?
Yeah, that's what just.
And justification under policy DMP.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you. Right, members, we're going to go back in time now to item 2.1, please. Talent chairs, Patrick.
Which one?
So, members, we're now moving to item 2.1, which is 20/503/675 full. And this one is Palm Trees Caravan Park, 2nd Avenue, junction with 3rd Avenue, Warden Road, Eastchurch. Thank. Also, when it gets a head of steam up on that computer. So, Yorkshire Copper.
There you go.
There's a very, there's a minor update to the report. Paragraph 2.3 talks about 5 of the caravans having been relocated. They haven't actually been relocated, they've been placed there without the other ones being moved. But as there's a condition which requires the caravans to be located in a certain position, and there's also a condition which requires, doesn't allow for more than 14 of the units to be occupied until the existing pitches highlighted for relocation have been removed, then I don't consider that to be a problem.
Okay, so
I'll explain that a little bit more by using.
For the hard of understanding, which I.
Yes, it's a bit convoluted. So currently, there, can you see where my cursor is? Yeah. Currently, there's 5 units which have been placed there. And I think 2.3 reads like they've come out of here and been put there. But that's not the case, they're additional. But as I said, because there's conditions which controls how many units can be occupied before all of the units to be removed are done so, and that those units need to be removed to fit in with the layout that's been proposed, That's the reason I don't think it's a concern. So just to clarify what the application is, this seeks the change of use of land within the holiday park to allow the station of 28 mobile units, which are shown in this layout here. The reason for this is because there is cliff erosion in the area. And I think this aerial image shows it. I think this is the most important image of the presentation. This shows how close the cliff is now. Can you see that on the with the lighting? Yeah.
Is it my ears that's blocking everything out?
So part of the site falls within the 0 to 50-year erosion zone, and therefore 37 of the caravans are proposed to be removed. These are the ones indicated with the red crosses and the blue. That's actually an M, but you possibly can't see that from there. But that's where the 37 units are. I say the application proposes to replace those with 28 units in this area, so there'll actually be a net reduction in units on the site. In terms of the site itself, the important thing in policy terms is that the red line essentially denotes where the holiday park boundary is. So where the units are proposed to go are in the countryside. Policy DM4 does allow for situations such as where there is coastal erosion for countryside locations to be used to relocate the caravans into. So I'm content in this instance that the use of this part of the site being the countryside is acceptable. Part of the reasons for that is that when you drive into the site, this part, which is designated countryside, and it should come up in a second on the photos. Yeah, it feels very much like you're in the holiday park rather than separated from it and in the countryside. And part of the reason for that is there's quite heavy, where it's heavily vegetated along the site boundaries, so it really does provide a distinction between when you're outside the holiday park and then going into it. For those reasons, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll move the auto recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Harrison.
I could have put this in as a written question, but as I didn't get the papers till, the last minute. 37 are being moved and 28 are going there. Where's the rest going?
They're being removed off the site.
Graveyard.
The caravan graveyard. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Beard.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So firstly, I fully support the principle of this. I think you saw from Paul said about it being the most important photo of the evening. You can see how close some of those caravans are to the cliff edge, to the point that people are opening their curtains and looking out straight down into the sea. We know that area is eroding fairly rapidly, and I think there was a drawing on there that shows how far has gone since, was it 2012?
Yeah.
That red dotted line, that's what's gone. I will support this. My caveats are regarding more enforcement. So we talked about those 5 marks as having already been removed, and currently they're still there, as I understand, but will be moved. The 5 that are currently in the application area aren't applied for on this. So although this is part retrospective, they're not actually in the location where they're proposed to be. And bases have obviously been put in, caravans have been put there, so at the moment, they are additional and potentially in breach. What I do welcome is that from what the 5 that they have put in, they appear to be larger, more park home style caravans, rather than some of the caravans that are on the cliffs that are a bit old and rickety. So I can also understand why the numbers are reduced, because A, they're bigger in size, and B, they're further spaced out. So I fully support the principle, but I do think we need to keep on top of this to make sure that the standards that we're setting and the conditions we're putting in are going to be adhered to. Because what I don't want to see is 28 caravans being put on this land and all the rest be left there and allowed to be occupied up until the point that one of them ends up on the edge of the cliff.
Councillor Martington, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've no objection to the principle of moving the caravans, DM4 and allowed as such. It's the water drainage that concerns me. By the very unstable thing, the cliff face don't fall like chalk. Chalk which falls down in the way. So does some of the harder sandstone. The softer sandstone in clay especially, water penetration actually gets to the bottom levels where the two different structures meet. It doesn't fall over, it slips back, it slips down. It's why you often see the grass looking at you. So the water penetrating from the top is a serious danger, and that's why I'm querying the water drains on the top. They now know that all the chines of pools from used to be very narrow gorges, now they're getting wider. There's no top grass, no tree, no path coming together. So it's the water drainage on question. It doesn't seem to be in definite statement. So
Yeah, there was within the report, and I'll ask our officer to come onto that.
Thank you.
Yeah, but obviously the current situation is that it drains naturally wherever it drains to, because there's no proposal in place. There was a query raised by the parish council, well, an objection raised by the parish council in terms of drainage, and officers went back to the agent to ask for more information. That is set out in the report at
Six one is parish council and 6.2 is the.
Yeah, so that's right. The consultation responses are there, and then it's dealt with in the appraisal section as well, paragraph 8.6 to 8.6 and 8.7. Essentially, there's additional drainage going in to the north of this, to the north of the access road, and that's going to intercept water from going over the cliff, which was the concern. Yeah.
It's you've got to keep yourself dry as possible. Everybody looks to enjoy it more.
Yes. And then there is a condition also, condition 9, which deals with surface water drainage, and essentially requires, if they're going to use infiltration, that requires further information to be submitted to ensure that the groundwater is protected.
Stability, yeah.
That's a condition that's recommended to be imposed. Yeah.
Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mission 3 states no more than 100 caravans and total station site. Does that mean there's 159 there now, or 164 with the additional 5 that we just heard about?
No, I've done a count up on an aerial image.
I have.
And I think it's 136. But the 150 is a historical condition which has been passed over from previous permissions. And my judgment was I couldn't see a reason why we change that now. That was my reasoning for imposing that condition.
So you meant to achieve a
Yeah.
It's 150.
Yeah, so the reasoning behind it as well is because it's a change of use application. What we have to consider in imposing that condition is if they went up to that limit, would there be harm caused? And in my view, there was sufficient room on the site outside of the erosion zone that there wouldn't be harm caused. There's always the option if members had particular concerns that they could, I suppose, take it down to 141 to account for the 9. But that was the, you know, the reasoning behind that, behind the imposing that condition.
Okay, I've just got Councillor Bonney, then Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, so, I mean, I fully understand that this is effectively a wasting asset that they own, because it's all what I am concerned about is that this moves backwards further and further into the countryside, and we effectively could end up with the entire island, everyone whose house is at risk, go 200 yards down the road and apply for planning, because that, and we end up with all the development moving inwards. I'm really concerned that if that 150 stays on there, I think it absolutely should be brought down. We want no wriggle room, no escapology, that where we are with numbers, that's fixed. I'm pleased that the numbers are going down. I think, honestly, totally agree with Councillor Bear said, about the quality and type of holiday caravan that's available, and overall we want effectively to see these shall we say brought up to a better standard to improve the offer and by definition the function of what the tourism economy provides the island. And to do that we need better accommodation. So I would support this if the recommendation was that the caravan number was reduced, so there's no wriggle room. And I am concerned that we start moving back. I mean, do we know about their ownership in the countryside beyond the green patch there? They have further.
I think the thing is, we've got what we've got tonight in front of somebody.
That can provide a bit of an
Well,
update.
effectively, we're agreeing to a precedent here that they can shift their caravans into the countryside. And what we'll end up with is every caravan site across the island is applying to do this, where they've got, coastal erosion. I'm not sure that that's what does that.
In this case, although it's clearly not shown in this drawing, it's there's holiday parks sort of immediately located around the site here, so they wouldn't have the option to do that. It's in separate ownership. There's a residential property which is set in quite large grounds here, so again that would appear to be in separate ownership. But we've got the condition which allows which says if you're in a situation like this, then there is the possibility of encroaching into the countryside, but it does also set out quite a lot of caveats to that you have to consider and sort of overcome. And in this case, I think it's, it quite neatly sort of sits on the holiday park and is okay, but it's hard to speak for another case that looks at.
Thank you. Just before I bring Councillor Henderson in, member, we've got 10 minutes to go, and I just beg your indulgence for extensive standing orders just in case we prefer that. Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, I just think we ought to be careful with this one. If East Church Parish Council had not objected, it would have been a delegated decision and it would have been approved. East Church Parish Council effectively only objected on grounds of drainage.
Yeah.
Those grounds have been answered, and fundamentally that's the only issue. So we really need to approve this. We're kind of introducing all kinds of
So just
speculation.
finally, then Councillor Beard before we go to the.
I was going to back up the point that north, east and west of this site is cliff face.
Yeah.
And if you go south, there's a caravan park, so there is no further room for expansion.
Fine, okay. Sorry. Yes, of course, I'm just going to bring our legal officer in.
Yeah, just to reiterate the point about precedent in terms of coming outside of an established area because of coastal erosion. It's not technically a precedent because it's actually allowed for specifically for holiday parks under your local plan policy. So it's a policy point. It's not a setting a precedent on the basis of this application. And it is specific to holiday parks. It wouldn't apply to any particular residential property that happens to be hanging off.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Chair, can I propose a beneficial phrase of no more than a month from the run caravan station caravan should be next touch and client.
I think that's okay on the basis that there's a previous approval on the site which replaced 37 for the 37, and that was where the condition, well, it was imposed on that one. So on the basis they're reducing it by 9, I don't, I think it's a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Fantastic. Right, those in favour of the recommendation as amended? That's 16, so that's unanimous, members. And finally, item 2.3. Item 2.3, and this one is 22/503385/full, and it's Wynn Hall, First Avenue, East Church. Just as soon as Mr. Byrne gets in there and winds up his laptop up.
Still sharing his screen. There we go. Okay. So keeping the theme running with holiday park development, this application is for a proposal for a holiday park at a site known as Wynn Hall on First Avenue in East Church. This is the site. It's a rectangular parcel of land and currently contains Wynn Hall, which is a dwelling, and the large rectangle that you can see at the back of the site is a pair of tennis courts. And access to the site is via First Avenue, which you can see to the northwest, which continues down to a point onto Warden Road. And the site is bordered on 3 sides by caravan parks, which you can see there, and to the south by a dwelling. Go back to those in a minute. This is the application proposal. So the proposal seeks to allow the stationing of 20 caravans on the site. The dwelling would be retained and would be used as manager's accommodation and a reception area for the holiday park. The boundaries of the site are already well screened, and the application proposes further screening, including some quite significant screening to the southern boundary with the neighbouring dwelling. Now, the site itself is here, and as members can see, it falls within the council's designated holiday park area under policy DM4 of the local plan. And that policy essentially positively allows, unsurprisingly, holiday park development in holiday park areas. And our view is that this is acceptable as a new facility within a designated area. The parish council have raised some concern about the condition of First Avenue as a highway. It is an unmade road. Parts of it are slightly undulating, and but in the main, it's an accessible road. Kent Highways have no concern or objection with the use of that road or the increased use out onto Warden Road. The other issue that the parish raised was some concern about drainage. During the course of the application, a drainage plan was provided. That was assessed by KCC's drainage team, and they are happy with the proposed drainage arrangement subject to conditions. So in light of that, and in light of the sort of positive wording of policy DM4, we consider that this is acceptable. Recommendations for approval. Thank you.
I move the opposite recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor James. I've got councillor Harrison.
Mr. Chairman, I have no objection to this, a holiday park being in a designated holiday area. This is the second one in a row where there's an objection from the parish council. They're not here. Now, I know I'm only subbing tonight, but I have been here many times over the years. Members have raised concerns that we are going to extend them. Some of you have been here like midnight and beyond because all these people raise objections so that it goes to committee and then they don't turn up to actually raise their objections. And I think that we used to have a planning working party, member working party, that looked at issues like smooth running of the planning committee. That was one of the things that I thought you were going to do. Because if you're not prepared to come along and account for why you want to put it before committee, then it doesn't.
I can tell you, there's probably the parish councillors that are here tonight in the Swerville Council guys. We've written to them, I say we, I'm talking about the head of planning, on numerous occasions have tried to engage parish councils. To those, as we've seen tonight, that turn up quite regularly when they put their part forward. Minster is another particularly proactive council in that way, but unfortunately there are those that still try to attend. I absolutely agree with everything you said. Councillor Beer.
I agree with everything that you've said. I would say I've got a meeting with the parish council chairman at each church next Tuesday, so I will bring that back.
Excellent.
Because I did manage to get them to attend when they objected to the prison application, but they did come and speak, and I thought we made some
progress. Past that, yeah.
I'm less convinced with this one than I was with the last one. You see on that drawing of the DM4 area that this, I cannot comprehend why the boundary was drawn to include this residential property but not one to the south. I can't fathom who put a pen to paper and decided that that was where the line was going to be. But this is and has been a residential property. And as you've seen, it's got 2 substantial tennis courts in the garden. But it's never been part of a caravan park. It's never had caravans on it. And when you look at that design layout, they are squeezing in as much as they can probably legally get in terms of spacing, to the point that you've got those 2 there in the side of the house that are faced sideways on. I worry that this is overdoing it. I can understand that it's within our policy that this site could become part of the holiday park. What I worry is the amount of units that they're squeezing on there, the impact that that's going to have. When we talked about the holiday lets in Upchurch earlier, we mentioned about proving a business case for need. Given the huge size of the holiday parks next door, and that's not one holiday park, that is multiple holiday parks that are part of the complex, what is the need to squeeze 20 into the back garden of this house? What is the business case to force 20 more caravans onto First Avenue in someone's back garden? I can't work out where to go with this one, but I think if they came back with a lower number, I'd be happier. But I don't think this complies. And as it says in the planning constraints, this is, even though it's in the DM4 area, it's classed as open countryside. It's outside of the built-up area boundary. I'm on the fence, but I'm going against the officer more on this one.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, just in respect of the issue about a business case, you know, the real critical issue here is that it's inside the holiday park designation. There's no requirement within that to prove a need for more tourist accommodation because the policy is, you know, very positively worded in that respect. So the principle essentially of utilising a site as part of a holiday park or increasing the number of caravans or so on is essentially in principle acceptable.
Councillor Bonny?
Yeah, I totally get the principle of it being Hollywood Park, but I totally agree, actually. It's a bit unusual, but.
Why is there one name?
I know, yeah, be careful. But I do think that's squeezing an awful lot onto that site, and I think if we're, as a council, 14, developing the new caravan park, I just feel this is too tight. The landscaping, too many in, I mean, those two either side of the residential dwelling that are effectively against the fence there. I think I'd be happier if there were less on site. I can understand we have to effectively give permission, but it is within our gift as the committee is to say what the density should be, and that's.
Well, the layout complies, as I understand, with licensing conditions because the case officer had checked that with the licensing team. In terms of, yeah, I mean, you're right, you know, two caravans in particular sit towards of the existing dwelling. I think if you go back to the layout plan, I mean, there are sort of various incidents there, as you can see further along the road where caravans are close to the access, and that's repeated in lots of locations throughout the complex. So the fact that caravans are very close to the roadside is not unusual in that area. And as you can see as well, they are proposing landscaping or further landscaping to the front of the site as well.
It appears to me in terms of statute, we're stuffed, basically.
I think it would be difficult. I think it would be difficult to make an argument that the sighting of those caravans is so harmful in that area that it could potentially, you know, represent a reason for refusing this job. I don't think we would have the ability to do that.
Councillor Bonny?
I think this is though, I think it's also part of the open countryside, and you have, normally you would have some sort of step. Yeah, this sort of effectively transition from one to the other. But here you've got a hard line, effectively, densely packed with caravans. I don't think that sits comfortably with it being, yes, I understand there's a good designation for holiday parks, but equally it is open countryside and it sits within, outside of that, effectively that built up area. So I think there is actually a balance to be struck there. And actually I think the balance is that that's too dense. I'm happy if we adjourn it and go away and talk to the developer as to whether they would.
We haven't had many deferments tonight. Okay, I was going to bring Councillor Darby.
I mean, obviously, as we've said about the parish council objective, they have to mention there's 5 caravans already there.
Yeah.
So that is that on top.
No.
They're going to put this 20, as I said.
Yeah, the maximum is 20 on the site, not 25.
Okay, because the art must be really crammed in.
At the risk of an evening non-decision, was that a formal proposal you made?
Yeah, I'll put forward a deferral on the basis of the officer discussing a lower density.
Okay. If members are minded to agree to that, can I suggest that officers seek to remove these 2 caravans here?
Yeah.
And if the applicant is willing to do that, that we have delegated powers to deal with it? Rather than bring it back?
Sorry, we'll just need a second and then, yeah, Councillor Winkler, thank you. Councillor Beard.
I would argue that there is concern with that one there as well, next to the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it literally sat between the house and the boundary.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of room there. It doesn't appear to have its own independent parking unless that's a tandem space behind the house.
Yeah, I think that one has the tandem.
I would suggest that those three.
Okay, councillor Hunt.
I think if you're looking at density, I think it needs to be looking at the whole site. If we're saying that there's too many on there.
Yeah.
And all of the, caravans that are situated in there are quite close together, moving those ones to the front doesn't really all create any.
Three, there's three, there's 2 + 1 now.
Well,
Do you want me to, do you want
but, I mean, my personal view is all right with it, but if you want to, that then, Stephen.
Well, I think if,
We've given you a steer.
yeah, we can give delegated authority to the officer to come up with a suitable scheme, I think.
Yes,
well,
do a better job.
I mean, it depends what members think is. a
Well,
suitable scheme.
okay,
You know, if
okay.
I get one off, is that a suitable scheme?
No, it isn't.
No, I know, yeah, so
That's, yeah.
we need to, we need obviously to understand what triggers
Right, okay.
delegated action and what triggers the referral back to committee. Can I just say in response to the overall numbers, I mean, of course, this is a holiday park, so we can't treat it in terms of applying standards like we would do for residential use. And, you know, these are, you know, the given standards for site licensing for caravan holiday parks. I would suggest that these, you know, you could make an argument that these two have a greater visual impact because of how they're sited in front of the property. This one, I'm a little bit unconvinced about the points that have been made purely because it's a holiday home. It's not.
That's not a nice place to be on holiday, it's stuck behind some, sorry, I shouldn't.
But to what, to what degree we can argue that that is unacceptable in planning terms for a holiday home, I'm not totally convinced. Whereas if we can limit it to these 2 units here, I think we have more of a case to argue that if those were removed, you keep the dwelling as the main focus, from the street, and that's more acceptable.
I just think.
Not yet, you can't. There's 5 in front of you. It's incredible. I can't believe it. Right, so it starts with councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chairman.
You've got 9 seconds left.
It's being bonkers. This is a site which is in an area designated as a holiday park. I think I'm right in saying that the provision of caravans is a licensing matter. And they have to be, I think it's 6 metres apart. Presumably, that's what is the requirement in here.
Yeah.
Presumably, if we do that, and the owner goes to appeal, he'll probably win the appeal and back us for some costs. That's my view. I think it's bonkers.
Okay. Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Chair. I think the third one that we're arguing and discussing is probably the one that has the largest effect on the main comment. So I think we do need to remove the of ask the officers to remove all 3 delegated authorities.
Councillor Martin.
It was purely regarding that third one. We're saying that the main property is still to be maintained as a dwelling for the manager. Shouldn't they are entitled to some residential amenity as well? Frankly, it's a bit close to be able to any sort of view yourself. You have to take into account there.
Yeah, correct. Although, of course, the caravan's a single story, so I would expect the boundary treatment will actually provide privacy to that garden area.
Councillor Martington.
Removing those 2, we're saying the necessity of what the site looks like looking at the house with the tree plants in the front. It'll keep the rural image.
Integrity.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, councillor Bonny.
Yeah, I think this goes back to design and good design. So I think that is the premise of the committee is about. So yes, licensing are in control of minimum spacing requirements, but that doesn't mean that we can't be insisting because of the transition from the countryside into this area that we can have an influence on design.
The thing is, that if it was my site, I'd be saying, no, that's what I'm going to get in there. So it's, unfortunately, as I said, we seem as though we're stuck by statute, so, that's where we are. But, so the proposal was to defer it for, the officer to go back and, look at removing those 2 caravans at the front and possibly the 3rd.
Well, I think we'll struggle. I don't want to string this out any longer necessarily.
Yeah, I don't want you to either.
How about if we look at whether or not, if those 2 are removed, is there a possibility that that one can be moved over here and that swung around 90 degrees and we get 2 caravans there, which pulls that one away from the boundary?
Well, you've talked me into it. Why didn't you say that 20 minutes ago?
Delegation to the officer.
Yeah. Okay, so it is deferred with delegations to the officer to deal with. Yeah. Well, I give you that option, Councillor Harrison, that was a quiz. So those in favour? Councillor Bonkers?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simmons. Abstentions? Oh, against, sorry. Yeah, it's 13 for, 2 against, so throwing that for, better to deal with and, so part 5 this evening. Thank you, members, for your indulgence. Thank you, officers, again, for, coming back and doing much the same again, surely.
Yeah.